Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another DxO webinar. I'm your host, Photo Joseph, and today we are going to be exploring, as you see on the screen, how to improve your portrait, wildlife, and landscape images with DxO PureRAW. Let's talk about what PureRAW is, just for anybody who is totally new to it. Many of you who have attended many of these webinars have undoubtedly seen DxO's PhotoLab, and you've experienced that. And PhotoLab, of course, is at version 4 right now, and there have been lots of changes and iterations to that over the years, including very, very importantly, the prime noise reduction. The previous version of prime was simply called prime. Within PhotoLab 4, it was upgraded to something called deep prime. And deep prime is, if somehow you haven't seen this before, you're going to get to see it today, but it is absolutely mind-blowing noise reduction. It is incredible noise reduction. And a lot, well, and then also within PhotoLab, you of course have the famous DxO optics modules, which are superior, just absolutely gorgeous treatments for your photos as far as lens corrections, removal of chromatic aberration, demosaicing, and all the things that go into processing a raw image. The idea being that using the DxO platform, you just get a better raw image. Well, turns out, go figure, not everybody wanted to use PhotoLab. Some people really wanted to keep on using Photoshop or Lightroom or Capture One or whatever their tool of choice was. But they did want to have the ability to process their raw files using the DxO engine because you do get such an incredible result out of it. And so this is where PureRAW was born. PureRAW is a standalone app that is just the raw processing and deep prime out of PhotoLab. It is not, and this is very, very important, it is not the DxO color processing. See, if you're working in PhotoLab, you get the DxO optics module, raw decoding, raw processing. You get the deep prime, denoising. And you also get DxO's color profiles. However, a lot of people are using the app of their choice, whether, again, that's Photoshop, Capture One, whatever, because they like the way that the images look. And I think this is very, very notable to Capture One users. Capture One users largely use it because of the color that they get out of it, the color science, you could call it, whatever you want to call it, that they get out of that software. They love it. And the last thing they want to do is give that up. So PureRAW does not apply a DxO color profile to your work. You get a DNG out. You throw in a raw image and you get a DNG out, and that DNG has the lens corrections and chromatic aberration removal and all the other good stuff. It has the deep prime noise reduction, does not have the color profiling, and it is still a raw file. What you get out is actually a DNG file. And that DNG then can be opened in Photoshop and Lightroom and Capture One and Apple Photos and Affinity Photo, whatever you like to use. And the color profiling you get on that is the color profiling, the color processing from that software. So that's a super important part of this workflow to understand. The whole idea is that you're getting a superior raw file than what you started with, but it is still a raw file. With that in mind, what this means is you can go back to a lot of your older images, and that's some of what we're going to look at today, some older photos that you might have wished were a little bit sharper, but they were shot with a cheaper lens before you could afford a really good lens. Or maybe they were shot on an older camera at what even today wouldn't be considered a high ISO, but back then, you know, on like let's say an original Canon 5D, 1600 ISO was crazy high, and you got a really noisy file. I mean, that's nothing today, but you can't go back in time and change the photo. But now you kind of can, because you can take that 5D file that was shot at 1600 ISO that has really obnoxious noise in it, process it through PureRAW, and get a clean file out of it. So it's really, really remarkable what you can do. So again, it's not just about your new photos, it's also about your older photos. And that's a big part of what we're going to be looking at today. Part of the workflow that's really important is not having to start over from scratch, especially when you're talking about older images that you might have done a ton of work to, and you don't want to have to start that over again. So that's part of the workflow that we're going to be talking about today. So with all that in mind, we are going to basically base today out of Lightroom Classic, since I don't have much reason to go to Photoshop without using smart objects and going into the knit collection. And as I discussed, I can't do that for some reason. So we're going to focus on Lightroom today. And it's also important to understand that even though I am using Lightroom, the workflow that I'm going to show you really applies to any asset management tool. So if you're using Capture One, this workflow is virtually identical. There is one drag and drop trick that we get out of Lightroom that is, even that is unique to Mac OS, but other than that, it's all going to be the same. So, okay, we're going to start with this photo, a portrait. This photo, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera here. Oh, and by the way, sorry, if you have questions throughout the presentation, go ahead and drop them into the comments. Lori is here with me. She's going to pull the comments, pull those questions out and drop them into a separate document for me. She's going to try and filter them, get some of the best or most common questions in there. So if your question doesn't get asked, we may not get to everybody's today, but I will certainly do my best to do that. Okay, so let me turn off the camera for now. There we go. And here we go. So this is Lightroom Classic. Here we have a portrait photo, obviously. And I'm going to look at the metadata on this. Let's see, this is shot with a, what was it shot with? A Panasonic S1. So this is a full frame Lumix camera, the S1. So quite a modern camera, quite high resolution, 6 by 4,000 pixels. And this is shot on a 50mm f1.4 lens. So this is a really, really good lens. In fact, this is an incredible lens and very, very sharp, very, very good lens. And if we zoom into this photo here, we'll go in nice and close. You can see that the photo has a little bit of grain to it, but that's actually been applied. If we go to the develop module, you'll see what I've done here in Lightroom, the way I've treated it. You can see all these different adjustments, little exposure adjustments and so on, a little curves adjustment, lifting up the blacks, giving it that little bit of a faded black look in there. And as I keep going down, let's see, I have a little sharpening is at its default. There's no noise reduction because this was a 100 ISO file, so there's no really reason to add noise reduction. But keep going down, here we go. Under the effects, I've added a little bit of grain. Very much a creative choice. This is a very personal thing. I happen to like having a little bit of grain, and of course grain is not the same as noise, but I do like to add a little bit of grain to my photos. If I just take this off, you can see the cleanliness of this file. Very, very clean bokeh, very clean, smooth, very sharp in the eyelashes. It really is just a very nice, good quality picture. So you think, all right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and put my grain back because I like it. So you think, okay, well, why on earth do we need PureRAW? Because this is not high ISO. It looks very, very sharp, but you know, maybe, just maybe, we'll get something different out of it. And this is part of the idea of using PureRAW. Sometimes you just don't know what you're going to get, and it's worth giving it a try. Excuse me. Sometimes it might be not worth it. You get the result back and you go, no need. And the DNG files that it creates are bigger than your RAW files. So that's a consideration. It's not, most likely for most users, you're not going to want to process every single photo that you work with. So if you do them one at a time, you do one-offs, you look at it and you go, yeah, maybe there's real no benefit to it. That's fine. So discard that one and go back to your original RAW. But it can't hurt to try, right? Because you just never know. So let's try it with this. Let's see what we get. Now, the workflow that I am going to do here is the kind of cool workflow that works with Lightroom on a Mac. And that is, if I go, oh, I guess I should launch PureRAW. That'd be a good start. If I have PureRAW running, I can Command Tab back over to Lightroom. I can grab my photo and then Command Tab over to PureRAW and then drop it in. So you get this drag and drop capability, and you'll see here that it has brought over the raw file, RW2, that is the raw file. And this drag and drop workflow is pretty slick. Now this drag and drop workflow does only work with Lightroom Classic on Mac OS. No idea why. I don't know if it's a Mac OS thing or an Adobe thing. I know it's not a PureRAW thing because that's not any different. But anyway, that drag and drop thing only works on Mac OS. Sorry. If you don't have a Mac running Lightroom Classic, then of course you can still do this. I'll show you a way to do that next that will apply to any app, no matter what you're using or what platform. Okay, so back into here. I drag that photo in, and the first thing that happens is you get this prompt to download the DxO Optics modules. The DxO Optics modules are where all the magic happens as far as the sharpening, demosaicing, and so on for the file. You see here that this is a specific file for the Panasonic S1, the Lumix S1, and the Panasonic Lumix S Pro 50mm f1.4 lens. So this is a unique combination. There are over 60,000, you heard me right, 60,000 unique combination files that are available for download from the DxO, well, from the website. I mean, technically you just drag it in here and it automatically downloads it. But but these are unique files per camera and lens combination that will apply the right amount of processing to the file. So just to kind of back up a little bit on this, if you're not familiar with it, the way that these little modules, they're called modules, the way that these modules are created is in the DxO labs in Paris, where they have a very precise method of taking every camera and lens that hits the market. And okay, let's be fair, there's not going to be absolutely every single camera and lens on the planet, but certainly all the common ones. They take it through a process of shooting in a test environment, test charts, and a whole very controlled environment thing, as well as natural out and about photos. And they go through a massive amount of comparison and testing and optimizing to come up with the recipe to give you the best file possible. And what happens often is that on a really good camera and lens combination, not a whole lot happens to the file because it started off so good. But then you look at some older cameras or some cheaper lenses where you have a lot of chromatic aberration, you have a lot of issues, a lot of sharpness, a lot of edge vignetting, and so on. And there's a lot more work to be done to that file. And so what you end up with are unique modules per camera and lens combination that will give you the best possible from your photo. That's the whole idea here. So when you first go to use a photo or go to process a photo in PureRAW, it's just like in Photolab. The very first time you try to open a file, the software goes, "Ooh, I haven't seen this before. Okay, quick, check the database. It's a Lumix S1 with this 50mm f1.4 lens. Great. Find the matching file and download it. Once it's downloaded, you don't have to do it again, but that's how that works. It just downloads that file. And you can see most of these are quite small. Some of them actually do get a little bit bigger, but they're all relatively small and they all download quite quickly. So here's this one is ready to go. I'll click on download selection. We'll see that one was only 0.5 MB, so that one downloaded really quick. And that's it. That will never have to be downloaded again. So now I've got this file here in PureRAW. I could add more files into here if I wanted to, but for this particular workflow, I'm just going to do a single image right here. And so I just click on process. Now with the process dialog, I have a couple of choices, but honestly, you're probably never going to change any of these. The first choice is under your raw processing and denoising method. The first choice is HQ, high quality, which is essentially the base level denoising. And then you have prime, which is the old style denoising, the old prime denoising that was in Photolab up to version 3. And then there's deep prime, the newer denoising that is part of Photolab 4. And so this is the most advanced denoising algorithm that there is. And then there's the format. Are you going to output a DNG or a JPEG? There really is not much point in creating a JPEG, but if you needed to just quickly rip through a bunch of images, have a bunch of JPEGs to send somebody, you could. But of course, going to DNG is kind of the whole point here, so that we still have that raw file. Of course, if you go to JPEG and you start editing it, you have nowhere near the capability that you would if you were editing from the DNG, so that's where we want to be. And then finally, where's the photo going to go? By default, it's going to go into a folder called DxO in the original images folder. So wherever this photo lives, you will now have a new folder called DxO, and it'll be there. But you can create a custom folder if you want. You can put it somewhere specific if you want to. But this actually makes the most sense for a lot of different reasons. So we're just going to leave it there. So again, everything at default: deep prime, DNG, DxO folder, and click process. Now, it was set to deep prime, which can take a while. My machine is really kind of ripping, tearing fast. It's a Mac Pro, so you may not experience this performance at home, but that is what you get if you're on one of the top of the line computers in existence right now. It's pretty fast. All right, so now that's done. Now what do I want to do? My choices are to just go to the Finder, and that'll just show me that picture in the Finder. I can view the results here in PureRAW directly, do a side-by-side. We'll do that later. Actually, let's just do it now. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll do a comparison right here. So this actually will show us the original photo in here without any of the treatment applied to it. And now as I drag this back and forth, now we can really see the difference in sharpness in here. So let's go into a 1-to-1 zoom here, and let me pan this over a little bit. And the amount of sharpness difference in here, looking at, say, the eyelashes, looking at the lips, even her pores, I mean, it might be, too much. There's such a thing as too much. It's just so much detail. It's almost incredible. And on a portrait, maybe you don't quite want that much detail. But, I mean, look, you're seeing every little hair. It's absolutely remarkable. Look at the flowers. The difference in the flowers. Suddenly, those flowers almost look like they're out of focus, but they really weren't. It really is remarkable. Look at her hair. Let's do that. Let's go up to the hair on her head and pan that back and forth. It is absolutely an incredible, incredible difference in here. Now there is something else that I'm going to point out. You'll notice that she had some blemishes on her face, and you might have not seen those over in Lightroom, and that's because I had retouched them. So here we are going to discover a potential challenge in your workflow. And I'm going to show you a couple of ways that we can work around that challenge. And this has to do specifically with the retouching, but we'll come back to that. Okay, so let's go back into here. I want to go ahead and take this photo over to Lightroom. So let me close this. And that photo is still selected. I can right click on it and choose export to, or I can just click on the export button, whatever, variety of ways. And then once the export is chosen, I choose where it's going to go. Am I sending this to Lightroom, which would be Lightroom CC, the cloud-based version, to Lightroom Classic, to Photoshop? I don't have Elements installed, so it's not an option. I've added Apple Photos and Affinity Photo in here. You would choose Select Custom Software to add whatever app you wanted, and that would then add that to the list. You could send it off to there. So let's go ahead with Lightroom Classic. You can also choose to export the original RAW. So this is very useful if in your workflow you are starting from your images in the Finder and you want to bring those images into Lightroom or Capture One or wherever, but first you're going to send them through PureRAW. And then you also want to bring over the original RAW so you can compare them side by side. Not necessary, totally up to you. In this case, I don't need to because it's already in Lightroom. That's where we started. But if that's something you wanted to do, you could certainly do that. Okay, so again, I'm going to leave that unselected. Lightroom Classic is chosen. I click on export. What this does is pops up the import dialog. This is not a plugin. This is not some special importer. This is just the standard Lightroom import dialog with that one image that I had selected, already selected for me. And I'll click on import and it'll bring it in. Now here's kind of a cool thing about the way Lightroom works. And I can't speak to how other apps work in this regard because I'm not, like Capture One, I'm really not that familiar with, but right now we're looking at the previous import collection. This is just kind of automatically where you get taken to after you import. And we're seeing, of course, that one image. I had originally had this photo in this folder here called, very creatively, Demo Photos. But notice that now there's a new folder underneath it called DxO. Remember, that's where the image was placed, was in a subfolder called DxO. Cool. So that's there. But I want to see these images side by side. Well, if you look under this little drop down under the folders menu, you'll see this thing that says show photos in subfolders. And what that means is when I select this folder, I'll see everything inside of that folder and inside of any folders inside of it. So that includes this DxO subfolder. So now I'm seeing my two versions of the images side by side. Cool. All right, now let's go ahead and let's open this one up. This is the original RAW, cc.rw2 here. And then I'll click over to this one. And this is now the deep prime version, the DNG version that came out of PureRAW. So now we can do a side-by-side on here, and let's actually do that. Let me go to the develop module, and I'm going to go into the split view and drag this one up here as a reference photo, zoom them in nice and tight, and there we go. So there's our two images side by side. Now, a couple of things to look at. First of all my color adjustments are already applied. Everything that I did to this photo is already applied to this photo, at which point you might think, hold on a second, how did that happen? Well, this has to do with XMP metadata, and I've been learning more and more about this as I've been using this and talking to other users, especially using it on other systems. And as far as I understand it, as far as I understand how this works, there's the XMP metadata is where Adobe stores its adjustments, right? So you've got your raw file, and then you have an XMP file that stores the adjustments. Oh, I adjusted the exposure, I cropped it, I did all that stuff is there. Depending on your workflow, that XMP metadata may be written back to the Finder before you imported the file into PureRAW. If it is, then your adjustments that you applied to the image in Lightroom beforehand will get reapplied automatically because that XMP metadata is being read again. In fact, it's written into the DNG file. A DNG file is kind of like a container that has the raw data, a bunch of other stuff, and the XMP data. But you can reset it. It's just metadata, so you can at any point hit reset and start the image over again. But if in your workflow process you find that sometimes nothing carries over, sometimes everything carries over, sometimes some things carry over, it has to do with what has been saved to the XMP file. And I believe that you can go in and save the XMP data, tell Lightroom to save that XMP data, which will then write it to the file, in which case everything should carry over. And these photos had that done, so it already carried over. So that's kind of how that works. If you're seeing some inconsistency in there, that's why it has to do with what is or isn't saved into the XMP. All right, so now we got these two images side by side again. The one on the left is clearly sharper, and I've added that noise. Let's go ahead and take the noise off of the grain, rather, off of both images. Just a little bit more. See, I can't actually do that from here. I have to get out of the compare mode, and let's go back to this one. That's the PureRAW version. Let's take the grain off of there. Okay, so I have no grain on either of these now. Is that correct? That is correct. Go back into the split view. And there we go. There's our soft, beautiful, soft bokeh in the background. No noise in the original one, so there's nothing to remove, but we are seeing a significant sharpness improvement on the left. Now, if you at some point feel this is too sharp, then you can, of course, go in there and add a little bit of softening in software. If you wanted to do that, you could go in and do a little bit of what's the filter I'm looking for? Not sharpening, noise reduction. There's one that works really well for doing a little clarity, reverse clarity. If you do a little reverse clarity on the photo, you could soften that up, remove some of the over sharpness if you felt like it was too much. But of course, that's up to you and how you want to treat it. Or maybe you decide, you know what, I don't like the new version, and then you just discard that and you stick with the original. Now, I talked about the blemishes on her face and the retouching that I had done. Actually, it looks like I did a pretty bad job here. I have to fix that at some point. It doesn't all line up. Wait, hold on a second. What's going on here? So I have these blemishes that are covered here. If I show the original, let's actually just turn off. Let's just do this. Can I just hide this? Turn that off. There we go. So you can see the original blemishes. There we are. There's the original blemishes. And those are in this photo over here, but somehow they're not lining up. It doesn't. Wait, what's going on here? It's like everything's kind of out of place. Well, here's why. Let me go back to PureRAW. And let's do a compare in here again. And wait for finish. There we go. Watch as I drag this image back and forth over her face. See how her face is moving? We're seeing a different shape, if you will, a different position of her face. What's happening in here is this is part of the optics module, part of what the optics module does. The optics module is removing any distortion that is in the lens, removing any pin cushioning that may have been in the lens. And this is a very important part of the DxO optics module process, removing that pin cushioning, distortion, whatever there might be. In a situation like this, the end result is arguably better to have that distortion applied to it, the de-distortion, undistortion, if you will, applied to it. So in this case, you may end up having to redo your noise, your retouching, because the retouching on the original image no longer lines up with what's on the new image. So that's a situation where you may end up having to redo that part of it. You don't have to redo all your other color work, but you may have to redo that. However, the next thing I'm going to show you is a case where I have an image that has considerable amount of retouching on it, and I see little to no advantage to doing the lens distortion correction, so I'm going to show you how to turn it off coming out of PureRAW. That's what we're going to look at next. But first, we're going to take a look at questions that have come up. First question, how does NIX Define 2 plugin compare to the new DxO PureRAW? Define is old. It's a very old algorithm. So PureRAW is significantly better. The deep prime that's in PureRAW is significantly better. So it's Define's old. That's just the way it is. All right. Next, can you open the process DNG file in Photoshop CS6? I don't know what version that is. Is that an older version? Because I'm on 2021. I'm sure you can, because it's Adobe. I have no idea how old CS6 is. There might be some restrictions in Adobe's lineup of opening newer generation DNG files. I don't know, but you can download a trial. So I would say download the trial for PureRAW and give that a try. I'm sorry, I just don't know how old CS6 is. I just don't have an answer for you. Sorry about that. When opening the PureRAW DNG in, for example, Capture One, we should ensure sharpening and noise reduction is all off. Correct. Now, this is a really interesting part of the workflow coming out of Lightroom. And again, I don't have Capture One. I suppose I should just buy it at some point and try this out. But when you go through this process from Lightroom, the native Adobe denoising and sharpening is turned off. So what you'll find in here, in fact, let's just show you this. If I go back into Lightroom and let's just go ahead and look at, let me get out of the, where am I? I want to get out of the comparison. Oh, there it is. No, what did I do? how did I get, I'm in the retouching mode. Let's get out of that. Okay, get out of comparison and look at the DNG file. Okay, if I scroll down to the, let's see, lens corrections, you'll see this is off. I don't think, to be fair, I don't think it was turned on before, and it wasn't turned on before anyway. But if I had this on and if I had noise reduction on through this process, it would actually get turned off automatically. So you generally don't have to worry about it. However, if your workflow involves copy and pasting adjustments, then you might need to pay attention to that. And in fact, I am going to show you that exact thing in the very next step. So, but yes, the short answer is yes, you do want those turned off. If you turn them on, the lens correction will effectively double correct, right? Because the lens correction is being applied, say, in Lightroom or in Capture One, is not analyzing your image, right? It knows what the file is and it is applying a profile for that file, but it doesn't know that something's already been applied. So it would effectively be double correcting it and the result would not be pretty. Same thing with sharpening. The sharpening on the already sharpened image would not look good. So so in general, you turn those off. There might be cases where you want to play with it a little bit, but for the most part, it's turning it off is the right choice. Okay, so now we're going to go to the next workflow and show you a couple different things at once here. I'm going to be using this photo here. Let's zoom out of this. Simple landscape, straight horizon, purple sky, looks pretty, but let me just turn off the retouching that I've done. Look at all this junk in the sky. This was a filthy sensor. This sensor was covered in dust and you can see every little speck of it here. And so I have already retouched this image. We look at it, you can see there's a whole lot of retouching dots in there, which I don't want to redo. So there's a whole lot of retouching happening here. All right, cool. So that's out of the way. We know that. Let's close this. Let's take a look at the metadata. It's an ISO 100 file. Okay, so should be no noise, virtually no noise. But let's just see what this was shot on. This was shot on a Canon EOS 5D, so an original 5D Canon 2470 lens. When was this shot actually? 2006, old school. And if I zoom in close to this, we see, you can see, I'll go to 200%. You can see some noise in here. And this isn't necessarily because it was a really high ISO, because it obviously was not. Excuse me. But it's more about low shadow areas, dark areas on what is frankly quite an old sensor. That's just what it is. That's just the result that we had. And back in the day, you'd look at that and be like, wow, this is awesome. But today, 15 years later, you're going, not so much. We can do better. So I want to see if Deep Prime is going to fix the denoising, fix the noise problem in there. So I told you I'd show you a workflow that applies no matter what app you're using. All right, I showed you how to drag and drop. But if you don't have that capability, i.e. you're not on Lightroom Classic on Mac OS, then all you have to do is right click on the photo and choose Show in Finder or Show in Explorer, reveal that original RAW file. And there it is. Oh, look, previously damaged. Interesting. The names that I have on my files, you never know. Here's that file. And what this means is now I can just drag and drop this file from the Finder or Windows Explorer into PureRAW. So let's go over to PureRAW and let me just kind of clean up the workflow. It's normally be on a higher resolution screen. I'm working on a low res screen here just for the sake of the demo. But you would have your PureRAW window open, you have your Finder or Explorer window open, and just drag and drop from there. So it's a very quick workflow. Right click, reveal, and then drag and drop that over. So that's all you have to do. So that workflow applies no matter what app you're using. Okay, so here's the file, 5D 2470 lens, needs to download the optics module, download that. See, that was a bigger one. That one's almost 10 megabytes. So for whatever reason, that one's honking. Save that. And go ahead and make this back to normal size here. And I've got that photo. Let's go ahead and process that boy and Deep Prime DNG, leave everything at default, hit the process button and let it tear through. And we're going to see the differences that we get. So this is, again, applying the Deep Prime denoising and the optics module to it. And we're going to see when we view the results here that there is some corrective distortion happening here. Distortion correction, let's get the words in the right order, that's happening in here. This is the case where you look at it and go, okay, well, is it straighter? I suppose so. Do I care? Maybe not. Maybe not. Well, let's find out. Let's take it to the next level and see if we are happy giving up the corrections. So I'm going to close this, right click on this one and export to application, Lightroom Classic, hit the export button. And here we go, import. And let's see if the adjustments are applied to that. There we are, we're already imported, demo file, let's bring this up. And there is the raw file, CR2, original raw file. And we go to the left, and there is the new one with the adjustments applied, but it does look like we're going to need to do a little bit of readjustments to our adjustments. We're not getting exactly the same look, and this is just because of the older file, I suppose, versus the DNG and how it's processed. It's just slightly different, and that happens sometimes. You can see, though, the same adjustments have been applied, but you can very clearly see that it is missing my retouching, but it's not. If I go in here and we look at this, the retouching is applied. It's not applied. It's not applied. That's okay. We're going to apply it anyway, but it's not going to line up because all these spots are in a different place. So here's how we would apply all of the adjustments. No idea why the retouching didn't apply. See, that goes back to what I was telling you about sometimes adjustments do carry over and sometimes they don't. I'm wagering that I had not saved the XMP file to the Finder. We'll just go with that. And the color adjustments have been applied, but the retouching has not. Okay, cool. So let's go back to this one. I'm going to hit Command-C, copy. Brings up the copy settings. What do I want to copy? Do I want to copy everything? Do I want to copy nothing? Do I want just the retouching spots? Let's just pretend that nothing had been applied. Nothing had been copied over. So I'm going to take everything. Ooh, but I got to be careful because going on with the previous question, it's almost like it was a setup. I do not want lens correction, so I'm going to turn that off. I also do not want noise reduction, so I'm going to turn that off. Everything else is okay to apply. Up to you, right? Obviously, some things you might not want to apply, but everything else is okay to apply. So it's the lens corrections and the noise reduction are the two things I want to get rid of. So now that I've copied everything except for those, I hit copy and go to the other image, and I'll hit paste, and I paste that in. Okay, so now it's pasted all that retouching. However, it doesn't all line up. I mean, some of them did, but look, you can see a spot here, you can see a spot here. It's really, the farther you get around the edges where the more change was made to the distortion of the image, the less of that distortion is going to show up. Okay, well, that's a problem, right? I mean, I don't want to have to redo all that retouching. And I can look at it, I go, you know what? I can live without the correction, but is it worth even doing it all? Well, let's take a look at the noise levels in here. Let's do a comparison again. And let's bring this up here into the corner and this up here into the corner. Let's see, I can't zoom the left one up to 200%. Don't know why, so we're going to go to 100% on both of these. And I'll just leave that still for a moment to make sure it draws through on your screen. And you should see a very, very dramatic difference. Even though this was only shot at an ISO of 100, there is still a significant difference in the noise level. So, okay, well, now I've got a conundrum. I got me a conundrum. I've got an image where I want to apply the denoising because it's awesome, but I don't want to apply the lens correction because even though it might be great, it means I have to redo all my retouching, which I really don't want to do. So we're going to do the denoising without the lens correction. That's the important trick here. All right, so let's do this. I'm going to, let's just get rid of this DNG so I don't confuse myself here. We're going to move that one, delete it, go away. Okay. So let's get out of the compare mode. And once again, I would say reveal in Finder. Well, I actually don't even have to reveal in Finder, drag it in, but it's already here in PureRAW. It's already there. So I'm going to reapply this without the module applied. And here's how you do that. Up here, you have a little button that says DxO Optics Modules. Click on this. And incidentally, when I hover over it, it says no actions required. That's because it has already downloaded everything. If for some reason, if you had skipped the download of a module, it would tell you here that it was missing, so it would give you a chance to download it. But if I open this, let's see here. This was, which photo is this? Previously, this one right here. There's the profile, but I don't want to apply the profile, so I'm going to say none. Don't apply the profile. You will, in fact, sometimes see multiple profiles applied. Sometimes the metadata is a little bit funky and the software isn't quite sure exactly which lens you shot it with, and so you might see multiple options here. But in this case, obviously, we're only seeing one per, but the other option I have is none. So I'm going to choose none, hit save. You can see here now it's got a little slash through it telling me that it's not going to apply that module. Now I'll go ahead and process the photo. Again, deep prime, outputs DNG, leaving everything the same. And we'll process this. So now what it's going to do is process the file without the DxO Optics module, but still applying the prime denoising. So let's export this. And actually, in fact, let's do a comparison first. Compare processing results. So now you can see as I drag this back and forth, there is no distortion difference. But if I zoom in to 100%, we can see the noise difference in there. I don't know how well that's going to come through on your screen at this level, but there is a difference in there. Let's now go ahead and send that to Lightroom Classic. And there we go, ready to import that. And we are done. Back to this. All right. So now there's the original one, the CR2. And here's the deep prime version. I need that retouching from the original one. So let's go back to the original. Command, I guess I have to go into the develop module. There we go. Select the original, hit Command C. I know everything's over there except for the spots. So I'm just going to choose spot removal, copy that, go to this one, hit Command V, paste that on, and boom, everything lines up perfectly now. So now, as I go back and forth between these two, there's a slight exposure difference, so I might want to boost the exposure just a touch there. Maybe highlights up, maybe play with the curves a little bit. Let's do a little curve adjustment. There we go. I like little curvy, little crunchy curves. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Anyway, I can play with the colors and adjustments, try and get those back where they were. But the important part is, let's go ahead and look at this up close. Is now we see, it looks like I missed a spot there. We see the clear difference between the two on the left and the right. So really, really a significant difference in there. So that is how you would go through a workflow where you do not want to apply the lens correction, but you do still want to use the deep prime. Very, very important part of that workflow. All right, over to the questions again. Can you confirm? I will certainly try. If you convert photos to DNG when importing into Lightroom Classic, any adjustments done to those photos in Lightroom do not get applied to photos dragged and dropped into PureRAW and sent back to Lightroom. You will only get an unprocessed image except for the PureRAW processing. You convert it to DNG on import. I'm not sure that if you convert to DNG on import, I don't think that PureRAW will even work with it. Let's try it. I don't think it will. So PureRAW works with DNG files that came as DNG out of the camera. So for example, Leica shoots DNG. You can take a Leica file, well, most cameras at least, and process those through PureRAW, no problem. If you have taken the original RAW file and converted it to DNG on import, I don't know that PureRAW will handle it. Let's find out. It's why we're here. Let me see what the second question is that's up, and then we're going to go try this out. What about camera raw in PSCC? Photoshop Creative Cloud, I guess. Okay. Will that work? Will that work be turned off when you take that file into PureRAW? Okay, so this was actually part of the workflow that I was hoping to show you, that something broke in my system. In Photoshop, so if you open up a RAW file in Photoshop and you apply adjustments to that RAW file, those are, once you've opened it in Photoshop, it becomes pixels, and anything you do is baked into it, unless it's adjustment layers on top. But anything that you do to the file itself, like apply a filter, will be baked into those pixels, unless you have opened that photo as a smart object. If you've opened it as a smart object, then every adjustment that you've done is metadata and can be reapplied anywhere else. And so the workflow that I was going to show you, that I can't, was basically exactly that. To take a photo that was a RAW file, open in Photoshop as a smart object, and then had work done to it, including a nick filter. That was the part of the workflow that fell apart. And then you go, oh, I would really like to apply, I would really like to take this RAW file and process it through PureRAW for whatever reason. Okay. So what you would need to do is take the original RAW file, not the PSD file, but the original RAW file, and process that through, and then you put through PureRAW, open it as a smart object, and then you would basically copy and paste all the adjustments, the layers, stacks, the smart object adjustments, everything into the new file. You probably could also drag the, copy and paste the new PureRAW smart object into the old file. I guess that would probably be faster. Copy and paste that over and delete the original one. And so then everything would apply as well. So that's what I was going to show you, but can't. So that's the answer to that. You don't have the same smooth round tripping because you're saving a PSD file out of Photoshop that has everything contained into one file. Whereas in Lightroom, your raw file is sitting next to an XMP file that has all the metadata applied to it. So it's two separate approaches that aren't exactly, it gives you a different workflow and different requirements. But the end result is you can do it. It's just more steps if you're working with a Photoshop native file that has a smart object in it. And again, to reiterate, if you're working in a Photoshop file that has a pixel-based source, you have allowed it to be rendered as pixels, and you've done anything to those pixels, those you can't reapply. You can't copy and paste those because those are permanent adjustments. Those have been done. That's Photoshop. That's Photoshop doing what Photoshop does. Okay, let's try out the DNG thing. Yeah, we've got time for this. Okay, let me think this through. Let's hide that. I will take let's take this photo here. I am going to remove this photo. Actually, I'm going to show this first. There's the photo. Okay, I'm going to remove this from here. Remove from Lightroom. And let's start from scratch. I'm going to get rid of the XMP metadata, and I'm going to even put this in a new folder called DNG test, just to really make sure that I'm doing this cleanly. Okay, so we have a raw file, Canon raw file, no XMP metadata. Great. I go into Lightroom and I go to import, import photos and video, and where were we? DNG test. Here we go. There's the photo, and you're saying I never do this myself. You want to convert to DNG at this stage. I thought that was like an option in here to convert to DNG. Maybe it's don't import, make sure I'm not missing something. Add to collection, no. Is it a preference setting? Let's see here. File handling, external presets, general interface performance, Lightroom sync display. Let me just quickly scroll through these. Oh, import DNG creation. JPEG, embed, fast, embed original. Interesting. This, by the way, would be an important part of being able to access that original file, embedding that. But, all right, let's just run through these presets real quick. Let's see here. If somebody knows where this is, please drop it into the comments to save us all a little bit of time in here. Yeah, I'm just looking. That wouldn't be expert. You would think it would be here. File extension, import DNG. Well, it's just what it is. Treat, replace, and a file name is. How do I import as DNG? Develop catalog preview, Lightroom sync, no. Display, no. How do I import as a DNG? It's not a smart preview. It's not a duplicate. It's not adding to a collection. It's not a develop settings. Is it? No, it's not a develop settings. Certainly not metadata. I'm waiting to see if the comment comes up of how to do this. Let's see here. Is there anything in here? Export, convert photo to DNG, validate, update DNG. Would it be converted after import? Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's what somebody's asking about. I'm going to go with that because that's the only thing that I found. If someone figures that out, can tell me otherwise, then by all means do, but we're going to go with that. So I'm going to import and then convert to DNG. So DNG test, there it is, import. One more check to make sure I'm not missing anything. There's nothing hiding under any of these things in here. I'm not missing. I just don't see anywhere about convert to DNG on import. Wait, here maybe? Nope, that just shrinks that. Copy as DNG, top of import screen. Oh, look at that. Haha, thank you. Super, that came in just in time. All right, copy as DNG, super duper. All right, now what do I have to do? Build a smart preview, don't import duplicates, don't care about any of that. File renaming, apply, nothing, destination, into subfolder. Cool, DNG, we'll make it a subfolder, organized by date. Excellent, thank you so much. Copy as DNG. Ha, cool. Just goes to show I never do this. All right, there it is. And one photo is converted to DNG. Okay, thank you. And that is the DNG file. Okay, so now we're going to make some adjustments to this. Let's get out of the compare mode in here. And let's see here. Do my classic, add a little bit of curviness to it, add a little curve. I think we pull the highlights down just a touch here. So I'm going to do a few adjustments, warm it up a little bit. Yeah, let's warm it up. Actually, I kind of like the cool tones on there. with little cool tones on there. Let's pull the highlights down a little bit, and that doesn't seem to be mattering. We need a little bit more color in her skin, so let's take a little bit of saturation. Nope, that's definitely not it. Let's go for the HSL color tool. Let's do, yeah, I'll do a little saturation on her skin. Let's just grab that. Oops, grab that guy. Saturate her skin a little bit. That's not really cool. Let's do a local adjustment. I'm just adding a variety of adjustments just because I want to have, what the heckers? Just because I want to have something to copy over. Let's see here, invert that, and let's do a little warmth on her skin. Where's my color temperature? There we go. We're gonna warm up her face a little bit. That works. Rotate that. That's a little bit overdone. We're gonna reduce that just a little bit. It's a little bit too much. Color temperature shift. All right, cool. And let's do one more thing. Let's add not crop. Actually, no, let's crop it. Cool. Let's do that too. Let's go for a 1x1. Do a square crop. So we are just really making sure that we are getting rid of, or giving us stuff to see what happens when we bring it over. I was going to do a vignette next. That was the last thing I was going to do. Sharpening, noise reduction, vignetting is somewhere down here. Post crop vignette. There we go. Let's darken the edges a little bit. Okay, cool. So there's my new image. Yay. I now decide, I want to take this into PureRAW. Let's see what happens. I'm going to, we'll do it the traditional way. Show in Finder. There's the image. I'm going to go to PureRAW. Let's make this a little bit smaller. There we go. Drag and drop that in. Okay, it's going to allow me to process it. It wants to download that one. Okay, cool. Download and save. All right. So there's the image. Process. Everything's left as alone. So that's great right there. So now we can see that we can reprocess an image that was brought over. So that's awesome. I'm going to guess, my guess here is that the adjustments are going to be applied because the metadata was already in the DNG. But well, maybe not already from looking at that thumbnail. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's just export this back to Lightroom Classic and let that go in there and import. And that went into, let's see, where were we? Non-RAW files were not converted to DNG. Not all the files being imported were RAW camera files only. Oh, I guess I had the, oh, interesting. The import was still left to import to convert to DNG. Interesting. Okay, well, it doesn't matter because it just told me that it didn't do it. So where were we? Is this where we are? Yep, there's where we are. Okay, so it did not apply the adjustments. The adjustments did not apply. That is blatantly obvious in here. But if I hit Command C, I guess we have to go to the develop module. If I hit Command C, we'll check all. Interesting, lens correction and noise should not be applied anyway, but we're just going to take them off and then back to here and paste, and there it's in. So now we've got the two differences in there. Significant amount of vignetting that was removed in the original image, but yeah, well, there's the answer to your question. Actually, it does look better. Sharpen our eye. Yeah, cool. And if we go back to this one and do a compare, oops, where were we? Compare, there we go. Split, there we go, split view, and you can see, yeah, quite a big exposure difference, especially look at the edges, massive amount of devignetting happening from the original file. Quite a bit sharper. Oh yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, there you go. There is the answer to your question. If you import as DNG, convert to DNG and import, you can still handle the file through PureRAW. That's awesome. I had heard something that you couldn't. So there might be certain file formats that you can't, or maybe some setting in the DNG thing where you can't. Don't know. But there you go. You've seen it live, ladies and gentlemen. You have seen it live. All right. With that said, we're out of here. Thanks a bunch, everybody. I appreciate you tuning in today. Fun as always. Thank you for the awesome questions and the opportunity to learn something new in my own demo, which is always great. All right, guys, take care. Bye-bye.